So now getting back into more breakdowns of Black Panther and the Intergalactic Empire of Wakanda, which takes place 2,000 years in the future, it's here that Ta-Nehisi Coates gives us the narrative of what's happening in this day and age. And it's fun to talk about, especially with Marvel Legacy reaching millions of years into the past and stretching countless eons into the future. And so if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so first and foremost, if you're one of the many, and there's been a few who've either hit me up in the comments of other videos or on social media or whatever, and what I'm getting is that there's quite a few people that are lost pretty much just jumping into this narrative. And that's okay, don't feel bad about it, because the series is still early and we're only like 6 issues in at the time of this video. And I believe that a number of you guys that I've been getting these messages from, or the comments that I've been seeing, are fairly new to the channel, and for that reason I've made an additional playlist that you can see down in the description, and it'll get you caught up with everything moving forward, and as it progresses along, then I'll be able to fill in the gaps. And moving forward, that playlist will focus on topics from this narrative literally in relation to the rest of the universe and all of time. But going from there and moving forward, since our last talk about the Intergalactic Empire of Wakanda, we've learned quite a few new things. And previously on this playlist, I talked about how it's connected to Secret Wars, and with T'Challa and Reed Richards defeating Doom, and how at the conclusion of that event, T'Challa had made provision for Wakanda to expand to the stars, and fast forward 2,000 years later, this empire has stretched across 5 galaxies. And that great feat was accomplished under the rulership of Emperor N'Jadaka, which is a name that we know of modern day to be Killmonger. And though we're not given the full explanation of how all these descendants from Wakanda were given these names that were passed down, we are given some explanation as the narrative progresses. And a good example is our main protagonist, who is initially nameless. And from the start, much like we talked about before, all we really know about him is that he's a prisoner working in the vibranium mines, and even though he doesn't exactly know where home is, what he does know is that this isn't it. And after much of his failed attempts on getting away, mainly because he was outnumbered and outgunned, and even with that, it was impressive how far he would get by himself. But even still, he would only get so far. He would get stunned by the guards, who were also instructed if they used lethal force with him, then they would be thrown in the mines as well. But this changed when a group of Maroons, who had formed a rebellion against Emperor N'Jadaka, and they set an attack on the mines, freeing a few of the slaves, all while taking casualties in the same. But for this particular worker who had been trying to escape, this provided him with the additional help needed to actually get out of there. And it was then that he met the leader of the Maroons, who was Captain N'Yami, who had been aware of his impressive escape attempts and also his acts of valor trying to get others out of the mines as well. And upon joining them, Captain N'Yami makes sure that everyone has a name, and it's here that he's given the name T'Challa, named after a man who was born a king and died a hero. And he's not just given that name because they're running out, like they're running out of names, but one of the reasons is because this one guy, to this point, has given the Emperor so much trouble within the vibranium mines that news about him had made its way all the way to the rebellion. And I go much more into detail on the previous video on this playlist, so feel free to check that out to learn more about him. But the main thing to keep in mind at this point in time is that there's a prophecy that one man will rise as a champion and turn the tables in favor towards the rebellion. And this prophecy was given by Captain N'Yami, and that the man that she had named T'Challa is actually the true T'Challa. And this far into the future, there are others who have been named after the original T'Challa in homage or in honor of his accomplishments, or even in other hopes to inspire. But Captain N'Yami, in a conversation with Nakia, she's like, no, this isn't that. And she shows her on her 2018 iPad Pro, which is what it looks like. But she shows her much of what she already knows, because at this point in time, much of them are educated on the ways and the history of T'Challa and his victories against Namor, Ulysses Klaue, and Mephisto. And the Mephisto was a pretty clever one. I think we talked about that a little bit in the Avengers 1 million BC Ghost Rider video. And they even go on to talk about his history with Storm, who's mainly referred to as the goddess Hadari Yao. But within this conversation, we get some critical information pertaining to why she believes this so fervently. And it mainly goes back not too far from their history, about 3 years back, when a man had returned to the planet Bast claiming to be the original T'Challa, and he overcame any trials that were thrown his way that would doubt him. But much of the belief of this true return began to get quiet not long after a battle between the Empire of Wakanda and the Shi'ar, which was a battle where the Wakandans were victorious and also retrieved the M'Kraan shard, which is literally a shard of the M'Kraan crystal. But it was because of what happened in this battle things changed for T'Challa, because it was in this battle that he had disappeared and many had believed for him to be dead. And the timeline from that battle up until the moment where they found him line up perfectly as if he had survived, had his memories taken, and was thrown in the vibranium mines with the other Nameless, which is Captain Inyami's theory, which she tells to Nakia, who doesn't buy it so much, and I really believe that's by choice, because although unexpressed at this time, I really believe that she wants him to be great and move forward, rather than go back and be restored and once again become the consort of the goddess Hadari Yao. But as for the Intergalactic Empire, much of the credit of this expansion is to their emperor, Injadika, who used methods he knew weren't civil, but surely they were what he considered to be necessary. And we know from the words of Captain Inyami that Injadika is responsible for the memories of T'Challa that were taken. And it's very likely that he did that because he knew the prophecy would take him out of power and hand everything over to T'Challa that he had forcefully taken for himself. But this was a method he used for all the workers in the vibranium mines, and throwing T'Challa in there, that was more so his hopes of him getting lost in the crowd. But because T'Challa is T'Challa, he stood out anyway, refusing to be captive, and he eventually escaped. Because in T'Challa's mind, even though he was nameless, he would have visions of the goddess Hadari Yao, Walker of the Clouds, who's pretty much Storm. But these visions of her were one of the main things that we would see that showed us that he was being called to something greater, and it gave him this gut feeling of he is not who everyone is telling him that he is. Not in these minds, this ain't it. But after T'Challa's escape and him joining the Maroons with the rebellion, shortly after they staged an attack on their Shango base, and it was upon this attack that the rebellion had taken the M'Kraan shard, which they had taken from the Shi'ar in the war that had been won roughly 3 years ago. And this was a huge victory for the rebellion, because possessing the power of the M'Kraan shard for them is a huge advantage in turning the tables against Injadika. And this victory they could not have achieved without their recent help from T'Challa. But it's also around this time that we find out that the Askari, who are pretty much the Emperor's police force, that they actually keep archived all the knowledge of everyone's memories who they take, which in turn means T'Challa still has the opportunity to have his memories restored. And after taking the M'Kraan shard, the Askari throw everything they have at the rebellion. And it's a lot of manpower, and it comes quick, mainly because they don't want them studying the shard and learning everything that they know about the shard and eventually about the rest of the knowledge and the memories that they've stolen. And during this attack, a couple key things happen, with one being the appearance of Manifold, who's leading the Askari, who throws the Spear of Bashinga at T'Challa, who catches it with his bare hands. And this is a pretty big moment, because when he catches it and his spear transforms to that more of its original state, and the other Maroons see that he's able to use it, it's a very significant moment, because this spear symbolizes the leader of Wakanda, the Black Panther, being that it belonged to Bashinga, who was the Black Panther that had discovered the Vibranium Mound many of millennia ago on Earth. But towards the end of this ambush, they were able to get the M'Kraan shard out of there, but only at the high price of the death of Captain Inyami, to whom Manifold was able to get off one more shot, destroying her ship. And with Captain Inyami gone, this then put M'Baku in her place much faster than what he was ready for, because he's fought with the rebellion for quite some time, and he's unwavering with his allegiance to the cause. But even still, the shock with this happened so quickly, it was a lot for him to bear. And with him initially trying to give it over to Nakia, and her telling him, look, you know the laws, you were once one of the Nameless, the Maroons need to be led by you. From there, he just did what he needed to do by taking action, and from there just let himself grow into the part. And so a couple weeks later, after escaping the Askari, when the rebellion finds out that their location has been compromised again, they then have to make the quick decision whether they fight or run. And it's here that we find out a bit more about the internal struggle of T'Challa, who on one hand is acting upon what he feels to be right, but even still has his moments where he doubts the idea of him actually being this great legend that is T'Challa, the Black Panther. And when given the decision to fight or run, he kind of has a moment here to where initially he's like, we should run and get out of here, just leaning towards the fantasy of him not having to deal with that responsibility and ignore these visions of the goddess Yao in his mind and pursue a new path with Nakia. But she's not hearing that, because at this point too many people have died and the rebellion has come too far to let all of that be for nothing. And she lets him know that she is convinced, and Baku is convinced, that he is truly T'Challa, and even though his memories aren't restored yet, there is no need for him to try to search and figure out who he is or waste time trying to create a new identity, but instead just be who he is and just do what he can with what he has right here right now, which at this point in time has been pretty impressive, because even without his memories restored, he is T'Challa. She knows he can feel that, and as much as she would also like to live this fantasy of the two of them living happily ever after, she knows that it's not worth it at the cost of the lives and the true heritage of the Wakandan people. And when she hands him this disc and she's like, you just need to accept it because Injadika already has, the Emperor believes you are the true T'Challa through and through, It's a pretty big moment, but when he looks on the disc and he sees this recording of Captain Inyami, and it's her making her statement to the rest of the Maroons, telling them that she's found T'Challa and all the things that have been accomplished since he's returned, along with his visions of the goddess Hadari Yao, and when he sees this, there's no arguing what he needs to do. There is no contesting all of this information. And these moments of hesitation that Nakia really called him out for, they all stem from his uncertainty from the memories that have been stolen from him. And I gotta tell you guys, this is one of those moments that has me almost speechless, because for the next 6 pages, nearly 24 panels, there are no words. Just action. Just T'Challa who walks forward with tears in his eyes and absolutely no idea of how he's gonna help these people. And even without the full memories of T'Challa, and with his memories stolen, it's really just this true testament that his heart is still there. That heart of a king, that heart of a warrior, the heart of a legend. And in the face of true uncertainty, he moves forward, flies back to the base, and when he gets there, there's no like, hey, how you doing? There's no small talk with anybody. He doesn't say a word to a single person, but his entire way throughout his flight, throughout the mountains, all the way back to the base, when he gets there, he heads straight for Captain M'Baku, who has also accepted his new role that he's only been in for like 2 weeks. And when he gets there, he just looks at him, crosses his arms, and you know he's ready to fight. Because the rebellion needs him. And that's heavy, man, like the true definition of character. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Pretty soon we'll get into the origin of Emperor N'Jadaka, and I'll clear up a bit more of the history of how he became who he is, and also his plans to stop T'Challa from being fully restored. But that's it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and we'll do it again in the next one. Alright, later.